Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Surgery Podcast. My name is Nikki Clinch, and I am your host. This episode is another episode from our Surrender series, where I get to sit with the wonderful Jessica Huie. Jessica is all about purpose. She is a space in the world teaching people transformational visibility, encouraging people to breathe life into why they are here, aligning with their mission, their vision, their purpose in this world, and mentoring them, coaching them into those spaces so they can really thrive. Whether it's embracing being seen to reach more of their audiences, or creating events and retreats, or launching a campaign, or creating a proposal to write a book. Jessica's 20 years of experience working in media as a publicist, speaker, entrepreneur, mother, and author has culminated in the gift that she has to share with this world. She is also the author of the wonderful book Purpose, also published with Hay House. We share the same publisher. And I get to sit with her in this episode to hear something so private, such vulnerability, and such truth. It really was a privilege to be able to hear Jessica share this story of surrender of her own. Jessica shares with us when her father died and was dying, and she was able to sit with him in those final days, care for him, and the huge transformation that came from being part of his passing that also enabled a real death of the character that she once thought she was and she needed to be in this world. Was the beginning of the end of that one that was striving and pushing and proving into the world, and the birthing of who she is today. It is a beautiful, beautiful story, and I hope that you get so much from this. Every time I get to sit with someone and hear these incredible moments of transformation in their lives, how much courage it takes to really surrender who you thought you needed to be in order to allow the space for who you were born to be, to birth through. So I can't wait to share this episode with you. If you have any aha moments, any insights, any shifts in perception, please do share in the comments below. In the YouTube channel or our Instagram page, or you can write to me directly through my website, www.nikkiclinch.com. You can buy my book, Surrender, which is now available all over the world, anywhere that sells books. And if you love this content, please do subscribe to the Soul Surgery podcast and leave us a review, because your reviews really matter and help this spread far and wide. That's enough from me. Over to Jessica Huie and another episode of our Surrender series. Thank you for listening. Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for coming on the Soul Surgery podcast. It's really wonderful to see you. How are you doing?
Lovely to see you too. I'm wonderful here in sunny Montego Bay.
Yeah, I just honestly, I just wish everyone who's listening could see the view that's next to your camera right now. You just are literally in paradise. Yes. So thank you for coming on and speaking with me. I've been wanting to talk to you. You know, I always find your work so soulful and so authentic. Everything you do, you speak so from your heart and from your soul, and you speak truth. And I can trust that we're going to have a really authentic conversation, which always excites me.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Monday evening chat. Yeah.
Yeah. So my invitation for you when I asked you to come on was I wanted to speak to you about a point in your life I wanted to speak to you about surrender, a point in your life where you had to face the invitation to surrender that took you through a transformational process. Now, you did mention something to me that you wanted to talk about from that invitation, but if anything else comes up in the middle of this conversation, I welcome anything that comes through. really the context of this is so that anybody listening can start to hear more and more that surrender is not a weakness. In fact, it takes so much courage to surrender our picture of how we thought our life should be, of who we thought we were meant to be or needed to be, and to surrender to something greater, something deeper, to the cosmic unfolding. So that's what I want to keep just allowing listeners to hear, that actually people like you, people like me, everybody at some point in your life will be invited to go through some version of your process, and that it's a transformational invitation. So share with us what came to you when I invited you to speak on this topic. What was the point in your life that came to you?
I mean, the instant point in my life was the passing of my dad, and that period where I cared for him. Because as I sort of shared with you earlier, it was the first time that even the word had kind of entered my consciousness in a way that, felt it had any real relevance to my life. I think up until that point, I would have been one of those people that certainly associated it with weakness, with giving up, with letting go of grit and, this kind of indomitable characteristic, which, was one of the things that I felt very proud, to be defined by this sort of steely determination to keep marching on, irrespective of, despite. And I think it was sort of 2016 when all of that changed, and for the first time in my life, I let go of the steering wheel, and what unfolded was, as you said, it transformed everything and actually went on to change the way that I live, and both my relationship with surrender as a concept, and just shifted me and just kind of put me in touch with myself and with my needs, and moved me into a space of beginning to start to honor those, to first of all to make myself available to hear and feel them, and then to honor them and make choices from that place of knowing and connection to myself.
Wow. I mean, firstly, I just want to say I totally identify with everything you just spoke of. I totally identify with the whole process of that. That's exactly what surrender has done for me. I'm super interested of going back first and talking about the one that had the steely grit, because I think we all identify with her, and I want to hear about her. Like, tell us about her. Like, where were you coming from then? Like, what were you doing, and where did you learn about the steely grit? Like, talk about that first.
Yeah, okay. It's really nice to be asked that, actually. People don't ask that anymore. They want to hear about that after,
Yeah.
I mean, it's an armor, isn't it? It's an armor, which is a kind of defense mechanism from everything, except it doesn't actually dissipate the feelings of lack and of not enoughness and of shame. It just kind of masks them. And I think for me,
Yes.
as a very young mom, I had a lot of that. I had a lot of that shame and this, the fuel which motivated me to achieve, which, paid dividends, certainly by society's terms, in terms of what they see as society says is successful. That ability to kind of continue in forward motion and keep doing and building, irrespective of the impact on myself, meant that I moved forward in practical terms. And,
Mm.
and as I did that, the way that I was perceived began to shift. And so what that did is moved me from, I guess, a person that was on in receipt of lots of the kind of um, disappointment, and sort of stereotyping, which, we all are. But as a young mum from a council estate, there was a kind of, there was a real, as I just put it was high on the news agenda at the time, in the sort of late 90s, lots of teen mums,
Yes.
and, um, it was a social problem of which I found myself a part. And,
Can I
that,
just stop you there? I just want to ask that because that's so significant, and I don't want to brush past that. You're a single mother on a council estate, and you're a woman of color, and you're in the 90s. Please, what were you feeling? Where were you in yourself? Maybe you didn't have the consciousness at the time, but with hindsight, when you look back, like what were you feeling in
I
yourself?
mean, I was a child, really. So I was 17, so I was still a little girl. And I think,
Wow,
yeah, it was
that's
a
so young.
baby. Yeah. But so I think it's shame. It's yeah, it was shame.
Mm.
Um, I realized very quickly that there was a way out of, being defined in that way by other people, but also by myself. And that was through doing a lot,
Yep.
doing lots and lots, and doing it really, really well. And,
Yep.
I already had the perfectionist bug, which, I know many of us developed early on as
Mhm.
a way of protecting ourselves from rejection or abandonment. And so really, the motherhood just layered on another layer onto what was already there. And so it was
Yes.
it's a perfect storm of this fuel to go out and prove the world wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So the armor goes on to prove the world wrong, and also to prove to yourself
absolutely.
that you can be somebody in the world. And you know what? I just want to say there's nothing wrong with that. That makes perfect sense. It makes
It's
perfect sense.
effective. It's effective to a point. It's
It's
effective to a
effective to a
point.
point.
Yeah, yeah.
So what did you go and do? What did you prove?
What did I go and do? I went back to college and I went off to university and I did all of the internships and worked for the BBC and worked for magazines and did lots of it free and, ensured I was better than everyone else, earlier than everyone else, more creative and smarter and forward thinking than everyone else. And as a result, opportunities opened up. And so early on, I started to develop a career in the media, first as a journalist, and found myself, having incredible opportunities and flying all over the world and working
Mhm.
with superstars and traveling to distant lands with currencies I'd never heard of. Um, Complete contrast to my upbringing. And I'm incredibly grateful for all of those experiences. And then moved into public relations because it paid better and started to have my own clients and built my own business at that time. And all sorts of things, all sorts of things.
Yeah, and you would say that, I mean, that's a level of success, and it certainly is a level of success that the world will celebrate, the world that we're in celebrates and acknowledges. But you mentioned earlier, did it take away the feeling of low self-worth? Did it take away the shame? Was that still there?
Absolutely. And I, looking back, through lots of the sort of healing work that I've done that continues. I discovered early on that I'm a workaholic. It's an addiction. I need this. I need this in order to avoid being with that which is too painful to be with.
Yeah.
And as much as, as much as it's so much more socially acceptable, the impact, I think, is arguably as um, wreaks as much can wreak as much havoc as some of the other addictions that are out there. So that was my
Yes.
coping mechanism. But there were kind of these sparks, throughout, even in my late 20s. I mean, I'm 41 now, but even in my late 20s, I'm enjoying this, and I was enjoying it. I just wasn't sleeping, and I was still, raising my daughter and juggling. And, I discovered early on that there was something else, because there was always a part of me that kind of, because don't you? You just need, it's in those moments of presence that you start to feel the conflict. You start to feel that
Yes.
something's out of alignment.
But you don't know what it is. You're
Don't know.
like, is this it? Is this it? Is this all that, is this as good as it gets? But you can kind of feel something, but you can't quite catch it, can you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had, when I started Colorblind Cards, I was 27 years old, and that was the multicultural card line that I started so I'm on a lunch break and looking for a card for my daughter, who's also going through this stage of not being confident in her body and in her identity. And I was looking for a card with a black princess on it, and just discovered there was nothing in the high street. And in that moment,
Mm.
followed the thought, followed that sort of nugget of inspiration that said, why not you? You do it. You create this. It's needed. And I did. And that, I guess in some ways that was also a moment of surrender, which I never ever would have labeled it, but it was so out of the box that I was in.
Yes.
And it started to, create a path which was moving me closer to who I was, and the real sort of truest expression of me and what I stand for and my values and who I'm here to be.
Yes.
But it took, it took many years later, again, for me to be sort of crashed and hurtled to the ground in order for the real surrender to, for me to allow for it, I guess.
Yes. So you were speaking about your father and he
Mm.
got sick. So can you talk
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, yeah. I mean, by that point, I'm 36. I'm running Colorblind Cards. I'm also running JHP. I'm running my own PR business. I'm working with, very high profile clients, and I've won all these awards, but I'm busier than ever, and I'm being celebrated for this and that. And, and it's become more defining than it's ever been. And I'm grateful, but I'm locked in by
Mm.
other people's perceptions of, who I was, I guess. And I'm also, and also who I felt I was. I remember this client sitting on my sofa. I remember I actually mentioned this in my book Purpose, and he sat on my sofa. He was a coach, and he said there was this sort of mantelpiece full of awards, full of these glassy awards, and he went, who are you without those awards? Like,
Ooh.
yeah. Like, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. And he's like, okay, let's move the roles aside. Who are you without the roles? And it was just one of those moments where, you remember everything about them because they are so profound and they speak to you on a level that your intellect is not ready yet to
Yep.
process. But it was one of those. And yeah, I couldn't answer him. I couldn't answer him then. But I think that was a real moment of me beginning to explore what the answer to that question was. It was such a gift,
Yes.
really such a gift. But yeah, fast forward to 2016, and now I'm doing everything, doing all the things. And by this point, I'm really ready for I know there's something else, but even the prospect of what that something else could be is really discombobulating, because I've always had a trajectory. I've always known where I'm going. I'm speaking retrospectively. I'd always known where I was going, and without suddenly the prospect of just continuing felt really painful and just not sustainable. I'd burn out twice over.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted, and but I didn't know what it was. I couldn't see beyond this thing that I'd created, and this beautiful thing.
I want to stop that, because what you just said is so profound, and not something that we normally can catch in the moment. That it was something that you had created. That in itself is important to highlight. That even though it feels like life is happening to us and we're responding and we're just kind of, this is what's happening, actually it's something that you had generated. And we're speaking on a deeper level, like the whole thing, the character that Jessica had become and had to be now
Mm-hmm.
to fit this whole story.
Absolutely. You're right. It's so important, and it's, I look back now and I kind of, it's lovely that you've said I speak truth and I speak authentically, but I thrived in a career and in a profession which was all about controlling perceptions.
Oh,
It's absolutely no coincidence that, it was kind of as far away from, what I do now as you can get.
yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. We create it. So yeah, I was very, very close to my dad. And so for the first time, I really just um, stopped. I stopped, and it would have taken, I think the fear of stopping, the fear of surrender, of letting go of that steering wheel was so great for me, not consciously, but I had to keep going. It's like I only knew how to have my foot on the gas.
Yeah.
And it needed to be something huge like that for me to sort of hurtle me into a state of presence, which is really what occurred. And, as we discovered that, he didn't have very long,
Mm.
I made a decision to kind of, I felt like it was such an honor to be able to care for him that I really lent in. And grief is a funny thing. Like I'm quite fascinated by it, like the way, it either catalyzes people to kind of, push back and resist because it is so painful.
Yeah.
But if you can lean in, and I didn't know this, but because I wanted to honor who he'd been for me, I did lean in, and as a result, and by lean in I mean I was really, present to the feelings of grief,
Mm.
and that in itself is transformational. There's so that I went on to start writing, which became a book before it was ever a book, in that space, like 3 days at his bedside, 3 o'clock in the morning, back of an envelope, stream of consciousness,
Wow.
in that space of complete presence and complete truth beyond all
Yes.
things. The armor dropped away because it served no purpose. And when you
Yes.
feel in that truly visceral, raw way, you just return, and there's magic there.
Oh, I totally get it. As you're speaking, there's something so profound about with being gifted with the opportunity to sit with death, because it's so hard to capture the unspeakable, because it is, everything just stops, and it makes you have a taste of the fragility and the absolute essence and beauty of every moment of aliveness that we've been so busy that we've missed. And in those moments, and I've sat with someone who's been dying, and I've also lost my stepfather, and it is a gift.
Yeah,
Your mind just stops,
yeah,
and it's like, this is all there is.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it was, it was an awakening for me. Much like surrender wasn't a word that was in my sort of personal dictionary. Neither was awakening, and yet that's what occurred. Um, yeah, it just changed everything.
So were you able? So you were with him as he passed over?
Yes,
Oh,
I
Jess.
was, and even before it was there was that moment. I held his hand. I had that privilege, but it was I don't know. It was like being so close to somebody as they are transcending and being so present that you somehow, some part of you experiences that transcendence with them. Um, yeah, yeah. Again, I wrote about this in the book. Like, I remember experiencing him, or being with him as he started to experience his surroundings differently. So he's moving into a different.
Yes.
It feels incredibly personal to share, but I know he would have been he'd be happy with me sharing it. Yeah, uh, and being privy to that, because you experience things on so many different levels, right? You walk beside the ocean, and you can be so in your head that you're completely disconnected from it.
Yep.
And I think in that space where you are, well, certainly with my dad, I'm no expert, on death, but as he was moving into that space, he began to experience the flowers through the window
Yeah.
in a much more connected way. And as he did, so did I,
Yeah.
which, was completely unexpected.
Oh, wow. So as he passed, I would imagine then you went through a phase of grieving, real grieving.
Yeah, yeah. And I had the gift of writing through much of that. I mean, Hay House were incredible, because I suddenly, soon after this piece of writing, which had no agenda, became, in the way that the universe kind of puts things in front of you. It
Yeah.
became the book. It became the book, and so then I had a deadline. So yeah, that was a really beautiful thing to kind of, in the evening pour into, which was
Yes.
really a real comfort, actually. Yeah. And it also felt an honor, just such an honor. Like, how blessed am I to be able to, honor um, his life with something that speaks to that part of my journey.
Yes. In those moments when you were able to, and they really are moments, like I want to highlight that those moments of being able to really see the flowers, and the moments to really be able to be present to aliveness. They are moments, and we kind of try to hold on, but we can't hold on. They come and then they flick in and they flick out. How did that start to shift how you knew yourself, or how you had known yourself or seen yourself in the world?
It's a great question. I think looking back, that period is where was like the start of my undoing. So up until that point, I had been on this mission to sort of fix myself. I'd been doing the work, some of the work, but I've been looking for a kind of all the things that we do, Reiki and this and that and that, and but I've been looking for something external, and
Yes. And
so
we kind of do it like a military operation. It's like if I do my yoga.
what if I upped my, whatever to 3 sessions a week and just kind of accelerated, because I am, perfectionist. If I just apply myself, I can fast track this entire process and be done with it, and then it'll be fine. Yeah.
It'll be fine. And like someone up there is just like laughing,
Yeah.
going, no.
Yeah. It doesn't work. But I think that is the shift, you know, again, like all sorts of, you know, things presented themselves in my life that began to move me from looking for an add-on that I needed in order to, you know, to accelerate my healing, to um, dropping stuff, you know. It was that
Yes.
shift. It was like, and it was like, okay, you know, one by one, the layers started to come off, you know, because I
Mm.
think, you know, with a family member, a lot of that is inevitable because suddenly the dynamics of who you
Yeah.
are shift, they change, they evolve, and so yeah, that was where I began to unpeel.
Yes. I actually opened my book with that, you know, maturation is not a process of adding anything or getting more. It's actually a process of dissolving and releasing what we are not. And there are more layers than we can even imagine of how much, you know, when we go really deep, like it's the behaviors and the patterns and the armor, but then it's even like the stories and the conditioning and the ideas, and it is just an unpeeling and an unpeeling, because the one, like the one you that you were born to be, your authentic self, is already there. You don't have to, it's more that she's just been buried under so many layers of whatever it is that we have perceived as who we are.
Yeah.
So
I can't wait to read your book, Nikki.
what was the little giggle about? What was that laugh about?
No, it was resonance. It was just resonance. That's all.
Yes.
Such a comfort in it.
Yeah. It is a relief, isn't it, to realize that actually you don't have to find, there's nothing to find. It's like actually, because there's this perception that if we can just find it, well then then we'll be okay. But actually that is the illusion, isn't it? There's nothing to find. It's more, what are you ready to let go of?
Yeah, and there's so much to let go, to be let go of. You know, there's
Yes.
so much, and gifts along the way. You know, in discovering, you know, what is there in that space. Um,
Yes. And it takes a real decision of trust. Am I right in thinking you were signed, like your original book proposal looked very different to the book that
yeah,
was born? Is that right?
yeah, and yeah, I mean, my head soon kicked in, right? Because as it does, because it's like, oh, if this is going to be a book, well, then here's what people would expect from me. Here's
Yep.
the book I'm supposed to write that would make sense, the shoulds, you know, for my career. And I always say, you know, I have no question that there would have been value in that book. But soon enough, I just discovered as I was trying to write that book, it didn't have anywhere near the same essence and purity. And as a result, it wouldn't have had the same, wouldn't have connected in the same way on that soul level, which, you know, I feel so blessed to say that that purpose has. But it was a leap of faith, and again, an act of surrender in not doing the thing that felt safe. Which
Yes.
of course isn't safe at all. It's just another shackle.
It's actually what we know,
Yeah,
because that's it, we hold on to what we know, and then we want to look for what else we can know, because knowing is some kind of perceived security. If we know it, then we'll be okay somehow. There's something so most people would say it's scary to be in the unknown, but really that's again a perception. But to step into the unknown and to listen and trust from there requires a level of presence. Like you have to keep kind of being with it and keep listening and keep moving forward in there and letting something unknown guide you.
yeah. Faith, like, yeah, faith, and
So
asking.
so tell us about, like, what is it that you trust in, like in those moments, particularly in that moment, because you know you were growing so much then. You know, you weren't who you are now then. Like, who? what did you trust in those moments?
I mean, I always had a belief in God or in a higher, in a higher power. I'd moved, I went to a Church of England school as a child. I'd moved beyond the kind of boundaries of religion by that point. But this, whatever, source or God was for me at that point was not something that I had a notion of having any real, any real impact in my life. And I remember saying to I remember kind of just that moment where you realize it isn't all here, like it doesn't all rest on your own shoulders.
Yes. It's
Was,
like grief and joy at exactly the same moment. It's like you're crying with grief because you carried so much, and you're just so grateful
yeah,
to have discovered that you don't have to do it all yourself.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
suddenly the light, the possibilities for what, okay, well, if I'm capable of this, with all of this stuff on my back, and the idea that it was the first time actually that I asked during that period. That was the other thing that was quite profound about my experience with surrender then, is that it was a very sort of still completely, I remember everything about it, moment in the car park of the hospital where I just couldn't. I had nothing else. And I knew I needed to have more in order to go up and get back to my dad's bedside and be who I needed to be for him. And that was the first time that I asked, I literally sitting in the car, I just unfolded and fell and then asked. I literally put my hands to the sky and asked for help. I asked my ancestors, I didn't ask the angels. I asked my ancestors and I asked God,
Yeah.
support me, please. I can't. And that was the first time that, I guess I truly surrendered.
Mm. Yes. Gosh, I've spoken to quite a few people about this process. All the details are different, but that point, that moment you just spoke about, is consistent.
Yeah.
Every person I have spoken to, including myself, and I write about it in the book, has had a moment like that.
Yeah.
When you just go, I can't help. Please help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Ah, it's such a moment of humility.
Yeah.
It's such a moment of humility.
And then we forget. And
Yeah.
we forget, right? And then we have to develop these practices to remind us to not forget,
Yeah.
until it becomes more habitual. But even now, I think there's so much in the asking, just the asking, ask and we receive. Yeah.
Yes. But before the asking is a moment, and this is what I feel is really important, to enable ourselves to ask, we have to we have to allow ourselves to admit that we don't know how to do this. And that's a difficult moment and that's the point that I know for me, I forget all the time. Like I actually have to go, oh, I actually don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And that
That's
I
true.
have to allow myself to say that,
Mm.
and because it's a risk. The moment I say that to myself, I have to then be in the unknown, and that's a risk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
So, as you were writing Purpose, did you notice that you started to develop a trust in yourself, a new kind of trust in yourself as you were writing it? You have this trust in something bigger, but the trust in yourself, as in who you are, not so much who you've been or what you have to do to achieve, but the trust in you.
Yeah,
Did that
because
start to build?
it did. It did. It did. And because I think it was I was just more present than I'd ever been. And in that presence, and I think having been connected to just this, things started to happen. There was just this kind of period of like synchronicities and signs that were thick and fast. So I found myself, in this. I relate very much to Anita Morjani. I don't know if you've read her book, another Hay House author.
No.
And where you're kind of you start to quit. Nothing else out. It doesn't. You are in such a space of questioning and dissembling ideologies and structures and yours and those outside of, the only thing that feels real is this little, sort of growing bubble of spirituality, which for me it was, it was new to have this connection. And within that, it was unquestionable. And I don't know if I'm sort of being very eloquent, but in receiving that, in feeling that connection to the power outside of us, simultaneously, the trust in myself did begin to build.
Yes.
But simultaneously, I knew I was sort of letting go of things left, right, and center. So there was also this complete, what the hell am I doing? Simultaneously, this like deep knowing and trust, and a parallel, what the fuck?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And people around you also don't know and understand what's happening, because because that's really discombobulating for them, because suddenly you're not the person that you don't fit the puzzle in the way that they need you to fit for their sense of comfort.
Yep.
So there's all of that you have to kind of really, I guess, find a level of courage in order to continue and not just contract back in order to fit. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what you have just spoken, and I know you must have thought that was kind of coming out in a messy way, but it came out beautifully, because what you captured exactly what happens in the process. I think I write this one line in the book. If I asked anybody, are you ready to awaken and to your most authentic, empowered self? Are you ready to come home? Everyone will say yes, but not many people really understand on an experiential level what that means, and what is required at the beginning is that there's a destabilization phase. Once you are losing the attachment to this idea of who you thought you were and how life was meant to be, and everything about how you've known yourself, it almost feels worse before it gets better. Like you go through a destabilization, and it affects everyone. Like suddenly your partners and your friends and everyone's like, oh, where's Jess gone? Like, hold on, bring Jess back. I remember my father saying to me, my first one was when I got sober. And he'd say to me, God, you were so much more fun when you were drunk. Like literally, my father said that to me. He didn't like the sober version. Like it impacts everybody because it triggers everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can, and that's important for the listeners to know, the destabilization is part of it. It's not, you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
But somehow in that, like you were speaking, can you find a way not to contract and just to keep sort of taking one step at a time through it? Because as the old story of yourself and your life is dissolving, simultaneously the new one is being written.
Yes.
And it's happening at the same time.
Yeah. Nikki, can I just show you the sky? Because no one's shown. Does I want to show her the sky?
Show me.
If I can just, because it's like almost.
Oh,
No, how do I?
God, that is so beautiful.
Isn't it?
That is stunning.
So I had to share that.
Like we're talking about awakening and the sky is just going, so share about where you are now. Like, tell us where you are now. I know you've just done a big change in your life. We did it. We did one similar times. Well, oh
Yeah,
no, you went a little bit before me. So where are you now? And speak about the change that's happened recently.
I'm in Jamaica. I made the move in July 2020. Um, it's been a process, like since that sort of 2016 um, breaking open. It's just been a process of more and more listening to my heart and soul, and trusting that guidance and acting on it. And I think that the move to Jamaica was definitely, it kind of, it was like, it hadn't been part of my plan. It hadn't been part of my plan. My dad was Jamaican, so I have a relationship with the country. It feels like home.
Mm.
But it wasn't on the cards, and was living in Surrey, and, we got into the sort of quarantine period of lockdown, and I just felt this sort of huge compulsion to leave, like to go,
Mm.
come here. And it, it was yeah, it's just the sense of being boxed felt, began to feel very real for me. And not because we were, I think for me, it was, and I guess depending on your perspective, it was really just the lockdown that became this sort of magnifying glass to what was
Yep.
already there, right? And
Yep.
yeah, I needed to be in nature. So yeah, here I am, and yeah, it's almost a year, and yeah, it's great to be here. It's not, it's not without
Yeah.
challenges. It's, I definitely had some nights. I don't want to make it sound like a walk in the park. I had nights, sort of dark, more dark nights of the soul, before I left, just in the dark, questioning, because I came out with my son. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? This is mad. Because from the moment that I made the decision, or the decision came to me, it was like 15, 16 weeks later that we were on the first flight. And
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, what I hear from the outside in is you're just listening. You're continuing to listen to something that doesn't make sense, and you trust it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thread. Like, you've just shared the whole process of the breaking down of the one that you once were. And now, there's that listening of that unknown something that leads your life. And that's the beautiful gift. That's allowing you to generate something that doesn't make any sense. Hmm. Beautiful, you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this very honest and deep and genuine and, I think, relatable conversation. I've heard so much that I relate to in it, and I know the listeners will as well. So your book Purpose is being re-released, is that right? A new edition of it.
Yeah. I think in November.
Okay.
Yeah. So with extra chapters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want everyone to hear you've added extra chapters to it about this move to Jamaica. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, so,
Exactly.
so important. Beautiful. Well, everybody, the details will be in the notes below, and you'll be able to go and find that when it comes out in November. Thank you so much, Jessica. It has been such a joy to speak to you, and so much wisdom and heart. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. Delicious. Thank you, my love.